How are you?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm not too bad. Thanks for asking. How has this been now, putting this book out for you?
Well, it's been exhausting, actually. People seem to like the book, which is nice, which always helps. And I think it's also stirred up a lot of people because I kind of maybe sometimes too honest or too straight for my own good. But, at my age, you've got, if you can't be honest, you can't be anything. So I just say it like I feel it, and that's the nice thing about getting older. When you're younger, you kind of naturally censor yourself, but now I don't do that anymore.
Oh yeah, when I was a kid and I wanted to know whether what I was looking at, whether what I was wearing looked stupid or not, I'd ask my grandmother because she would just tell me.
Grandmothers do that.
One thing that came across to me is just the long road that led to Logan Roy. I mean, you got so much praise for Titus Andronicus and King Lear and Hannibal Lecter and Winston Churchill, and I want to talk about some of those. But were you prepared for the reaction that you got for being Logan in Succession?
Not quite to the extent that the reaction has been. The great thing had been for me throughout my career was, people always kind of knew who I was, but there was also an element of anonymity. I could just come and go. I had no problems with stuff. But now my anonymity is gone because of this show, and that's the price you pay. But it's okay. I mean, it's part of the course, as it were. But no, I mean, yeah, it's certainly. I mean, we did the thing in London where we all went to London for the launch, the UK launch of the show, or the European launch of the show, and we did it at the Royal Festival Hall, and it was packed. There was about 2,000 people in there. And when we walked on, the reaction was astonishing. And my wife, who'd been sitting in the audience, she was saying, it was like watching a rock concert. She said, it's like you were rock stars. She did actually say, you're a little long in the tooth to be the leader of a boy band. I said, well, but it was that, I mean, it's the fact that people, have really taken the show to their hearts. And I think it's because human beings love to hate, and this is an ample opportunity to really go, oh, I can't stand these people, but they find them totally compelling.
Yeah, it's a good. I mean, I remember when the first show first came out, and I'm one of those people who watches it as soon as it comes out. Like, I don't even stream it. Like, I watch it as soon as it comes out. And um, yeah, I remember people saying that, like, I think these are the most despicable people in the world, and that's why it's fun to watch them. But then I agreed with that at the beginning, but then I started rooting for them and rooting for individual ones and relating to them in a way.
I think that's what happens. Yeah. And that's legitimate. That's legitimate because they're human beings, they're flawed, ridiculously flawed. And they, to a certain extent, certainly from the kids' point of view, they can't help the fact that they're incredibly rich because it's their father who's done it. But at the same time, the problems that go with that, and that's the satire, that's the satirical comment of the show, is the fact that these people have their sense of reality becomes very skewed, and that's always the problem with the rich. They're not in touch. They really aren't, and they would deny that. And so of course we're in touch, and you go, no, because you've never had to do this or you've never had to do that. You've never had to want for anything. It's all come to you in a way. And the difference between Logan and, for instance, all the other characters that people talk about, the Trumps and the Murdochs and the Conrad Blacks, is that Logan is self-made. They all were inherited. Murdoch had a newspaper business, which he inherited. Trump had his father's business, which he inherited. And Conrad Black was similar. So it's a very interesting kind of dilemma that comes out of the show because of the people involved.
That intersection of Logan's life and your life in this book I found interesting. You're just growing up in Scotland in those early years I found interesting, and sort of your own path, which I didn't know, to acting. I was hoping I could get you to tell me a story or tell the listeners a story that I know. But I got a real kick out of it is how you got your name, Brian
Oh yeah.
Dennis Cox. I had never heard anyone be named like this before.
No, it was an unusual thing. The family had decided, well, the ladies in the family had decided on the name Colin, and they all agreed on Colin, and which was okay. Uh, my dad was not sure about it. Didn't he didn't quite do him. And then when he went to the registrar just really didn't like the name at all. So he said, "Have you not got a better name than that?" And he said, "Well, I've always liked the name Brian." And he said, "That's a great name. Let's call him Brian." So I was called Brian, and of course, unfortunately, nobody, because my mum was probably because she was very ill, she was probably in a morphine haze, when my dad got back and told her the news. So we don't know what her reaction was, but here I am, Brian Dennis Cox.
That thing you said about your mom was probably ill. Your father was a very giving man, but died when you were young. Needless to say, you didn't have a fortune to inherit like Donald Trump or like anything like that. Looking
No,
back, writing this book, how do you reflect on your life, your early life in Dundee, and how it sort of led to now?
well, it was difficult, but I didn't even realize it was difficult because I was just getting on. I mean, I'd lost my dad. My mother had these series of breakdowns, which resulted in a major breakdown, and she was out of action for a good 2 years. And I was kind of looked out for by my sisters. Well, one sister in particular, because the other sister was in the south. And then the youngest of, I'm the youngest of five, and I have three much older sisters who are like 12 to 17 years older than me. And they're still alive. My brother's gone, sadly, but they're still going. They're amazing. They're in the 90s, and they're extraordinary women. One of them is the youngest one is in late 70s, but she's heading that way. So it's really interesting because they had their lives. They had their children. They lived in fairly strange circumstances. My eldest sister had 2 rooms and on a landing with 5 other dwellings and 1 toilet on the stair, which they all shared. Actually, I think there were 2 toilets on the stair. So on the outside stairs, so you would go down to the toilet. So it was, and they lived in their 2 rooms. So I went and stayed with them for a while, but it was not convenient for my sister. And she was great. I mean, she was wonderful, my sister. She's still going, and she's my eldest sister, and she was kind of a bit like my mom. So I was very grateful to her. But also, they enabled my younger sister to go to Canada. My sister emigrated to Canada in '57, which, of course, my mother had done like 30 years before. In 27, she'd gone to Canada.
Where in Canada did they go?
Toronto.
Oh yeah, right here.
Yeah, Toronto.
Right,
yeah.
right. So there's a line in the book that stuck out to me in terms of like how your upbringing and how the tragedy that you suffered in your life and what you went through in Dundee led to where we are. You said, "The desire to act came from my childhood and all that tragedy I had to deal with." How does dealing with tragedy lead to a desire to act?
It was this harmony, this way of bringing people together, which is what church does it, theater does it. Even the cinema in the old days used to do it. It doesn't do it so much because it's become so impersonal now. But in the old days, it was a very much more personal thing. And that was the thing that that inspired me, that I thought, I want to do this because I love the effect of what I do. I love that effect. I love that harmony and that sort of community that's created by just a very simple act of anybody, really. And that was what sustained me. And of course, the tragedy was something that just helped kind of fuel that in a way, because I didn't have any alternatives. I just had to follow through on what was on the hand that I'd been dealt as a 8-year-old. And I had no control over it. So there was nothing I could do. I couldn't fight it. I couldn't do anything. I just had to allow it to be. But at the same time, my vision was about, I'm going to go there. That's where I'm going to go. I'm heading there. And that was all. And as I got up, as I grew up, I realized that this was the thing that really would sustain me, because nothing else, because my family couldn't sustain me because they'd gone. My mom and dad had gone. I had sisters, but that was okay. But I knew that I had to sustain myself, and sustaining myself was not easy, but it was, I don't think a child should be that independent, but I was,
Yeah.
I was just completely independent.
I wanted to play you something and get your reaction to it. And I know it's important to your story. Just take a listen to this.
I've still got some fight left in me, not like most people.
I'm not saying you ain't. Where does all this fighting get you?
Have you ever seen where not fighting's got you, eh? Like my mum and dad?
What do you mean? They've got all they want.
They've got a television set and a packet of fags, but they're both dead from the neck up. I'm not saying it's their fault, mind you. They've had their hash settled for them so that all the bloody gaffers can push them around like a lot of sheep.
Seen you in some funny moods, Arthur. Never seen you like this before.
There's a lot more in life, Bert, than my mum and dad have got.
Brian, do you know what that is?
I do. Saturday night and Sunday morning, Albert Finney. That was the inspiration for me. You see, my adherence was always to American films, because that was what I grew up with. James Dean, Marlon Brando, Spencer Tracy, Jimmy Cagney, Humphrey Bogart, all the other extreme with Martin and Lewis, Abbott and Costello, the great Danny Kaye. All of that was my life. That was my world. Yeah. But it was American, and I used to talk with an American accent when I was a kid. But I thought, well, it's not going to work, is it? Because I'm not American. So what do I do? And then when I was 14, I went to the Plaza Cinema on the Hilltown in Dundee, and they were playing Saturday night and Sunday morning. And I saw Albert, and I just went, wow, it's possible. There's a guy, working class. It's actually set in Nottingham, but he's a Mancunian. He's a Salfordian, actually. He comes from Salford. And there he was, representing something which was brand new and kind of angry, at the lot and the kind of feudality of how people were supposed to live their lives and not complain and just get on with it. And he was just saying, my mom and dad, and he talks about his mom and dad are dead in a way. And of course, it's what happened, that we underestimate the effect of both wars, the First War and the Second War, on, which was basically to 50 years, half the whole of the 20th century. And the ramifications of that went on, so that when I arrived in the 60s, on the back of the free cinema, Saturday night and Sunday morning, This Sporting Life with Lindsay Anderson, John Schlesinger's Kind of Loving, Billy Liar, Tony Richardson's Loneliness of a Long Distance Runner. And this was the working class beginning to express itself. And the atmosphere was ready for it. We were ready to do that, right? And it was a great period, because it was a period of tremendous social mobility. Of course, in the 70s, it all started to close down, and we all went back to the first number we thought of. And it's the frustration I have with the UK is it's so feudal, and it's everybody in their place. You're not meant to do it. And of course, the Celts, and I'm a Celt, we don't express ourselves. We will never let, my mother's greatest praise would say if something was good, she'd say, oh, that was quite nice. And because it would go no further than that. There was not that. We weren't particularly enthusiastic, only in our creativity, only in our writing and our acting, and painting. And that's where we're creative.
Anthony Hopkins said that to me one time. He said that he was raised English and unable to express himself. So how strange it was that they could get on stage and finally these men could express themselves.
That's right. That was exactly right. Tony's right on the money for that. And he was Welsh, and they've had the tap under the bath for a lot longer than the Scots and the Irish. They really have. And that's right. And it's difficult. He's had all that difficulty with the UK, and that's why he tried, he did his best, he came back, he did some wonderful work, but he was fed up with the sort of patronage that used to, he tells his story, and it was me when I met him. Laurence Olivier's 80th birthday, and there was a big celebration at the National Theatre. I met Tony, and he was, because I have such respect for him. And he was kind of, I could feel there was something listless about him. There was something unsatisfied. And I said, what's it going? I said, well, he said, it's okay. So I'm doing it. He said, but he was actually rehearsing King Lear. And he said, I had a thing the other day, in his rehearsal. He said, it was really interesting. I had this thing the other day. I had an idea. And I thought, like you do in rehearsal, you go, this is an idea. What about if we do this? And I thought, and I said to David Hare, David, I think that maybe, and I said whatever it was. And then he said to me, oh, you think that, do you, Tony? And it completely took the wind out of my sails. And I just thought that was always the way people would do that. They would kind of they would try and cabin, crib, and confine you in a way. And of course, there were actors who were liberated from that. Tony was one eventually. Albert was one. Nicol Williamson, the great Nicol Williamson, was another one. And Peter O'Toole, they sort of liberated themselves from that. But it was very hard. It was very tough because of the conditioning. And I could feel that very strongly, and when I came south and studied and went to Lambda and had the best time of my life. And then I went back to Scotland initially, but then I came back and I started to work in the English theatre, and it was great at the Royal Court. But there was always that element of...
Yeah, you were working class Scottish in high-end, high-class English theatre.
Yeah, really. And it was fine. But I mean, Tony had the same problem. He did the production of Macbeth, and he just felt he was being milked dry. And he did a runner, quite rightly, because the strain. And also he had he was drinking in those days. And but it was completely, I'm completely sympathetic to him because of what he went through. I never had the drink thing. I didn't have that. My life was too fractured I wanted structure. So that's why I got married when I was very young. I wanted structure. I didn't want any of that kind of wackiness, the wildness, or, marijuana, for example. I wouldn't do any of that. And then when I was 50, I thought, I'll try this, and I haven't stopped.
I want to play a clip from a role of yours we wanted to ask about. Take a listen to this.
You want to know how he's choosing them, don't you?
I thought you might have some ideas.
Why should I tell you?
You get to see the file in this case. And there's another reason.
Pray tell.
Thought you might be curious to see if you're smarter than the person I'm looking for.
Then by implication, you think you're smarter than me since you caught me.
No. I know that I'm not smarter than you.
Then how did you catch me, Will?
You had disadvantages.
What disadvantages?
You're insane.
My guest, Brian Cox, is the diabolic serial killer Hannibal Lecter from the 1986 film Manhunter. It's our first movie introduction to the Hannibal character. Since then, we've seen the aforementioned Tony Hopkins, Anthony Hopkins, and Mads Mikkelsen put their own spin on Hannibal. I wanted to talk about your portrayal of Hannibal Lecter just for a second. I love how you describe him as insane, but not crazy.
Yeah. Yeah, he is insane. And, if you look at these films, I was very influenced by a Scottish, he was the first serial killer I ever was aware of. It was a guy called Peter Manuel, who, a trail of mayhem, murdered 3 young women. He murdered 2 whole families. He was and he did it all within the space of several days. It was like he had this, and he also, apparently there was plans to kill other people. He had this thing, but he was a killer. But there was also something very mundane about it. And then when you look at Ted Bundy, Ted Bundy could have been a great politician. He had a great gift. He was gifted, but he had this fatal flaw. And then you realize, and later on when I did Nuremberg, there was a whole talk about evil. The evil is so mundane. It's so, it's even more dangerous because the people you don't always know who the evil people are. The ones that are kind of mentally distraught, because that's usually what they are. There's a sort of distraught element to them. And that was what was so interesting for me, was to play Hannibal in that light, not to kind of be crazy, but actually to be insane, which is a different thing from being crazy. Being insane means that your grasp of, you have this own sense, overblown sense of your own reality, which doesn't fit in with the world's reality. And that's what makes you kind of go wacky. And that's what happened to him.
And that's how you started to see this character.
Yeah, I saw that very much so. And also Michael Mann, I have to say, psychologically, he was a really interesting director. He kind of pushed it down that road so that we were able to do things in a much more offhand way as opposed to studied way, and just present them as, and a lot of people kind of don't, they miss the sort of the kind of crazy thing, but that was not my choice. I thought it was a much more, much more really more mundane and more hidden, that you go, wow, this guy is something, but I can't pin him down. He seems all right. He seems fine, but no, there's something deeply, deeply wrong.
That's the scary. That's even scarier.
Yeah, that's right. And mind games, because that's what Lecter loves to play. He does it with Clarice and Silence of the Lambs. He plays these mind games that he sort of mind fucks all the time. That's what he does. That's his great thing. And it's horrific. It's horrific what he comes up with and what he creates, the way he's murdered people, the way he's eaten people, the way he's cannibalized people. And it's so extreme, but it is so crazily normal for him, or those characters. There's a frightening normality about the way they behave that you go, oh, this is ghastly.
I want to play another clip. Take a listen to this.
You bust him here, guns in hand, and now you find they've turned sausages. You talk about love? You should have trusted me.
Dad, why?
Why? Because it works. I win.
That, of course, is Logan Roy, a media magnate, all-around curmudgeonly patriarch in the award-winning HBO series Succession. One of the things I was surprised by in the memoir was that Logan Roy wasn't supposed to go past one season.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing that was told. I mean, I think that was a manager thing. I think they just said, oh, we're only thinking for one season, but it wasn't. I don't think it was ever serious, because in the conversation I had with them, I came to that, and there was a big pause. I mean, Adam McKay, who's the exec producer, was in LA, and Jesse, our incredible genius creator, he was in Italy. And when I said, so it's a one season part, there was this pause, and then finally he said, oh, no, it's not. And clearly they'd just been toying with the idea of one season. But I do think that once they had the conversation with me, they realized it was going to be more than one season, because of the way his shadow falls over the whole thing.
Yeah.
And the fact that he comes from one sensibility and his kids are coming from an entirely different sensibility.
Yeah.
They're entitled, they're spoiled, and it's very hard for him because he loves these kids, but at the same time, he is horrifyingly disappointed.
Yeah, because you've said that it was important that you find out whether Logan Roy loved his children. That was important to you in how you wanted to portray this.
It was important to me because it meant that was a motivating force. Love is a great motivating force, and if you love your kids, you get motivated by that. And I mean, Logan is so dark, and his own life he's had such a rough life in many ways. So he's invested in his children, and he knows that they can't step up to the plate, and they're having real difficulty because they feel it. My other favorite line is when he says, and he talks about, what, because they give it away when they say, well, what about us? What's going to happen? You go, make your own fucking pile, do it yourselves. And that's the interesting element in Logan. It's not about, he'll let his kids, he'll give his kids all the money, but they have to do the job. They have to be able to do the job. And they're constantly failing to be able to do the job. And they do stupid things. Like I talk with my son and I say, well, and it's only a speculative thing. It's not, oh, you're not a killer, you've got to be a killer. I'm just saying, you're not a killer, you've got to be a killer, you've got to be able to kill. And then he goes out and tries to kill me, and it's so obvious. You go, that's not the point, that's not, the killing is to do with protecting yourself and also making your mark.
See, I thought Logan was like that little smile, which is crazy acting, by the way, on your part. Like, that's wild acting on your part. That little smile in the last episode of season 2, where you kind of turn and I couldn't tell whether you were smiling or not, which, by the way, has to be impossible as an actor for me to not know whether you're smiling or not. But I thought it was him being like, oh, good for you, you're trying to kill me.
Well, it was a lot of things. It was good for you, and also what a fucking idiot. I mean, we have a conversation about killing and saying that, and so he thinks, oh, that's what I got to do. So an hour later, he goes and tries and kills his father, and you go, where is your brain? Where is your imagination? Where is your own sense of being in this? But only in relation to your father. And it's very funny. I think one of the things that comes across is, we have this thing where we blame our parents for so much. And we say, oh, our parents did this and our parents. And we either go against our parents or we have loving parents and we go with them. I mean, my parents were just sadly absent, not through their own fault. Nature took my father away and put my mother in mental jeopardy, So I had to deal with that. I had to cope with that. So I had to deal with it in a very realistic and true way. That was how you deal with it. And loving my mom, and she was as wacky as all get up, but that was because of what she'd been through. And it was not just to do with the fact of my father, but it was also to do with, and I think she was very much emblematic of working class women who went through horrendous things, I mean, my other favorite story is when, my first wife lost twin boys, we had this, which was terrible for her. And she lost the twin boys. And it was awful. And she also she went a bit crazy. I came home one day and she was looking in a cupboard and thinking that they were hiding somewhere. So when my mother came to visit and I related this, I was very, compassionate about it and saying, Ma, it's really hard for her. And my mother was just searing. And she had this phrase, which is in Scots. She said, oh, Brian, we've all dropped parents, which means we've all lost children. I mean, and that was so common for working class women. That's actually common for women generally. It wasn't just the working class. I think upper class women suffer from the same thing.
But for that to be the reaction, that was their reaction to her son telling her, my wife has miscarried.
Yeah.
Twins. Wow. Yeah. We've all dropped parents.
Yeah, that was it. And I understood where it was coming from. I thought it was deeply unsympathetic. And, but I had become, I was no longer, my working class roots. I was becoming very middle class. I was in the process of moving my class along, which is, and it's the usual crap about living in that people do that. They get betterment, and therefore their class moves on, and they lose that connection with their roots. My father had it. You see, he had that. He had it. That he felt that connection, and he felt that care. And again, it was to his own detriment because he couldn't control it, and he certainly couldn't control the fact that people took him. They wouldn't pay their bills. Some because they couldn't afford it.
I got to tell you, I mean, and if there's one thing I get from the memoir, is that acting is a job. Acting is a job that if there's one thing I get from the memoir more than anything else, is that acting is a job. You show up, you act, and you go home. And if we have time, I'd love to talk a little bit about the other side of things, that what happens when you live your role and method and all that. But so I'm a bit nervous to say this to you, but I'll say it anyway. I do see a connection between Logan and you, even in the story you're telling.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think there are connections. There's no question. And I think that I've informed Logan, and I think they've taken Logan, because the first thing they did was they changed my birthplace, and they didn't even tell me. It was Peter Friedman. He said, "Oh, we've just done an ADR session." This was in the 9th episode of the first series. And
Yeah,
they've changed your birthplace, and I said, "So what? I'm not born. I was born in Quebec. That's where I was supposed to be born." Although I'd moved around, it's just sort of mid-Atlantic mutt. But I said, "Oh, well, where am I born?" And then Peter said, "Oh, I can't remember." He said, "No." And then he looked up on his device, and he said, "Oh, here we are, Dundee, Scotland." And I said, "But that's where I'm from." And Peter said, "Well, isn't that a coincidence?" I said, "Yeah, it's a hell of a coincidence." And then when I went to Jesse, I said, "What's going on?" He said, "Oh, we thought it'd be a little surprise." I said, "Yeah, it's a tremendous surprise, suddenly being told that you are no longer where you thought you were from." And I think they realized that, because when I first was approached about the job, I suggested playing him Scots. I said, he could easily be this character. And Jesse didn't want that. He said, no, he has to be American. Well, the truth of the matter is that, they're much that, look at, Murdoch. He's an Aussie, but he spent so much of his time not in Australia, So anyway, that was the deal. That was the character, and it was, but it also resonated with me, just in terms of where he was in terms of the disappointment with the human experiment, and where I am with the disappointment of the human experiment. But the big difference is he's a misanthrope, and I'm an optimist. I think things can get better. That's what I feel. But Logan, no.
One more question on Succession, and then I want to talk to you about acting, if you can give me the time. Who, other than Logan, who is the most intriguing character on Succession to you?
Well, I think one of the most intriguing characters is Tom Wamsgans. I think he's a very intriguing character because of what he goes through. He's come into this family. And he's coming with a sort of gaucheness and ambition, and he's meeting something that he is way beyond his ken with this, this extraordinary young woman that he's married to, who doesn't know where she is so lost, and lost in her, I love you, I don't love you, all of that's gone on, and Tom's emergence as a sort of, really as a protector of me. That he's somehow or other, he's somehow got Logan, and he's just thought, I'm actually safer with Logan than I am with my own wife or my own in-laws, my brother-in-law, my two brother-in-laws. Because at least with Logan, I know where I am, because Logan's very straight. Logan just says it like it is. So he feels that. So I think that's an interesting, but it's also, it's weaved its way through. I thought that Kieran's character, Roman, was emerging because he was doing some extraordinary things, really gifted things, especially understanding the money, the Middle Eastern money, and the fallacy of that. He was very, very gifted. So there was a lot of, that Roman might emerge as well. But of course, he became just, he's this potty mouth as well. So he's stunted in many ways. So it's just so difficult. But the character I think mostly that I think is interesting in that sense is Tom.
Do you think
he's an outsider?
Yeah, like yourself, like Logan. Do you think you're going to be alive by the end of it?
I have no idea. That's not my decision. And
I can see it. I can see a version of the show that ends with Logan being alive.
Well, I could see some version of it as well. They could kill him off, and I decide to do that. But I think that's an easy way out. He will die eventually. We all die eventually. But I think what they should do is do something really original with it, rather than do that, because that's a kind of obvious thing. And I think these writers are so tremendous. I'm sure they'll come up with something much more interesting.
Brian, I understand that this is your 4,000th press interview about this book since it came out.
4,000.
Yeah. I believe we're in the 4,000s now. But if you have a bit of time, I'd love to talk to you about expiation
Yeah.
in acting. Expiation is a word you use in the book to describe how somewhat of your approach to acting. It's a word that I only knew as sort of like atonement or making things right between people, and I had never seen it in the context of acting before. I actually ended up screenshotting it and sending it to a friend of mine who's an actor. That passage. Could you talk to me about expiation?
I mean, I think actors are like priests. I think that they're performing ceremonies of a deeply spiritual kind, even though I don't, I'm not a believer in God. I don't believe in any of that. But there's something about the essence of humanity which is still a mystery. And we put all kinds of things onto it. But definitely what happens in a big theater and the collective consciousness of a group of people who come together for an evening, there's something that happens in terms of like their day is expiated. They feel, this day has been worth it. And I know this because of this extraordinary thing that I'm witnessing and how it's being brought to me and how it's resonating right through my very being. And I think that's what happens. I think it's a form, you watch somebody like Judi Dench and you feel it, this form of expiation, that things are lifted from you, they're taken from you. That you've committed a sort of, you've freed yourself spiritually in a way, and you expiate your sins, you expiate your feelings, you expiate your thinking. And I think it's the word I use because it seems to me to make sense of what the job is of acting. I mean, I am a working actor. I don't have any of the cant in acting. I think there's a lot of crap talked about acting. I think it's a lot more pliable than people give it credit for. It's a lot more, there's more relaxation to it. People, there's this need to make it a religious experience for you in relationship to your role. And I don't think that's helpful at all. And I don't think that's the job. I don't think that's what it's about. I think there's something else that's happening, which is without ego. And it's more about the id than the ego. And that's what the actor has to understand. They're serving something. And it is a bit like, it is a bit like saying the priest serves something. The Mass, which is, because I'm a Catholic, the celebration of the Mass, the communion, the body of Christ, the blood of Christ, all of those images, what's going on is a form of how do we expiate ourselves today in church. And I think the theater does that, and I actually think it does it better than religion, because there's no God involved. There's no extracurricular activity involved. It's the activity that you're doing, and I think the theater is very fine that way. So I love it for that reason. I love it. I absolutely love it. And I feel very proud to be part of it, because that's really at root is what we're doing. At root, that's what we're doing. And sometimes actors think it's a lot of nonsense. Actors will have opinions about it. But for me, at root, that's what I'm doing.
I love so much of what you said. I love the idea that when you go to the theater and you see something, it makes the living that whole day worth it up to that moment.
Well, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, and there's also comic elements to it. I remember when I was working in Russia, I would always go to the theater because I was so tired. So I'd always sleep because I didn't speak Russian. So I'd always sleep through the first half hour of any Russian play. And then I'd be awake and then I'd get into it. And, my body would adjust and I would adjust to the fact that I don't know the language. But then the comic thing is, I remember going to see Arcadia by Tom Stoppard. And it was very, very successful, big show in London. And I remember I was sitting beside this woman who was with her friend, Dorothy. And there was her, Dorothy, and I think she was called Jessica, this woman. And she said, so they were settling down to watch the play. And they started it, the play started. And the woman promptly fell asleep on my shoulder. Within minutes, she'd fallen asleep on my shoulder. And then she woke up in the interval. And she said to her friend, she said, Dorothy, I think we should go and have a drink now. because it's going terribly well. I'm really enjoying it. The play's going very, very well. And she said, okay, should we go? So they went off and they had a drink, and then they came back, and the second act started, and she fell fast asleep again on my shoulder. And the play finished, and she applauded like mad. And she literally turned to her friend and she said, Dorothy, that's what I call a wonderful afternoon in the theater. Now, it's easy to mock that, but you can actually, if at least you get some great rest, that's something.
Yeah, that's expiation to a certain extent, you know.
That's expiation also, you know, not of the variety, not in the way I kind of imagined it, but of course she felt good, you know, because who knows what went on in her semi-dreaming the state, dreaming the play as she was not watching it, but let the sound come over her. So I just found it fascinating that human beings do that, you know. They kind of happily deceive themselves into some kind of joy.
Let me ask you a question on the method acting thing, and I know this has been asked of you a couple of times now, but here's what I wanted to know. You're critical in the book about method acting. I think you're actually less critical than the press thinks you are. I think you're more concerned.
I'm considerably less critical. The press always go for the easy thing. You know?
Yeah. Well, like for instance,
it's like the gossip in the book is about that much.
Yeah.
It's a 3-inch book like that. You know. Yeah.
Well, if I can be honest with you, I tell you where I thought that really came out. I thought the whole thing with you and Jeremy Strong, who plays Kendall on Succession, I thought everyone ignored what you said, which is I'm worried about him. Not that I'm critical of him. I should point out for people who are listening, method E kind of guy. He lives his character all the time. And you said I'm worried about him, and I felt like I shouldn't be critical of my peers here, but that was missed. I'm worried about him.
No, that was my concern. My concern is, you know, and Jeremy's a great actor. He's a fantastic actor. He's great. He's great to work with, but he puts himself through it. And sometimes, as a result, he puts us through it as well. I don't mind as long as the work is good. That's my main concern. I don't care what happens. But I do think there's a kind of culture that's encouraged that. And I'm a little skeptical about it, you know. Also, it becomes exhausting. I mean, you look at Dan Day-Lewis. Dan Day-Lewis retired at the age of 55, and you go, well, I'm 75, and I have no intention of retiring until I drop, you know.
Well, here's my question on that. So for people who don't know, method acting is where you live your character all day. I mean, famously, Daniel Day-Lewis, when he played, when he was in Gangs in New York, he dressed like it was 1920s New York all the time. He gave himself pneumonia.
Well, 1820.
You're 1820. You're right. 1920s would be very different. 1820s.
Be very different.
You're right. Could he have achieved the same greatness without it?
Well, that's a debate. That's the question.
What do you think?
Personally, I think he could. And I think he would have. But I mean, I think for some people, acting is difficult. I mean, acting is difficult. Don't get me wrong. It's not a piece of cake because it demands so much of you. You know, you are demanded, but you've got to be able to step out at a moment's notice, not in less than a moment's notice, in a second's notice. You've got to be able to step out. You've got to be able to look at it, go back in, look at it, go back in, look at it, go back in. That's the process. If you're too involved, the reality somehow shifts in the wrong way. And that's my feeling about it. You know, that's the feeling I have. And, you know, people swear by it. Al Pacino swears by it. De Niro, but De Niro apparently now he's just, oh yeah, do you want me to do that? Oh great, I'll do that. I mean, as people get older, you realize you can't. It's not going to be. It doesn't sustain in that way anymore.
Did you ever try it? Did you ever say, maybe I'll go down to the pub and I'll be Logan Roy tonight for a laugh?
No, I don't want to. These characters, I keep them to the conditions that they are in, but I'm not gonna. I don't want to be carrying them around with me. No.
Well, you've been generous, Brian. Let me close off like this. You close your memoir by making it very clear that with all you've achieved in television and in film, your heart remains with theater. What does theater give you that you've never been able to get anywhere else in acting?
Well, the theater is because it's a relationship. with an audience. You know, in film, you don't have that relationship with the audience. I mean, it's speculative, you know, what the relationship is. I mean, you have it when you watch a movie and you see the audience effect, and you've got the right, you've pressed all the right buttons, and you go, oh my God, they're loving it. Oh, that's good. That's work. But you're not feeling it the way you feel it when you're in the theater, because it affects you. It really does, and it's an extraordinary feeling. In many ways, it's the best feeling ever. I don't want to be indulgent about it, but I just want to say that's what is valuable. And a lot of people don't like the theater. I mean, Dan had problems with the theater. You know, he played Hamlet and he saw his own father, and there was a lot of stuff that went on. There was a lot of demons arose for him doing Hamlet, and it was taken over by my great student, Ian Charlson, who was brilliant, and he had AIDS, and he played it right up until 2 days before he died, and was astonishing, apparently. I mean, I never saw it. I'd seen Ian's previous Hamlet, and I remember I had this conversation because he said, you know, we met, and he said, you know, they've asked me to take over from Dan as Hamlet. I said, that's great. He said, well, why didn't they ask me in the first place? And I said, because they didn't, because that was not the deal. But they're asking you now because Dan is not able to go on with it, and you can do it. You will be, and he was apparently. I was away. I couldn't see it, and sadly, he died because he was a wonderful, wonderful boy, really extraordinary talent, Ian Charlson. He's in Chariots of Fire. He plays little, you know, really fine actor, and beautiful singing voice. And I said, you do it. And he did it. And he was astonishing.
I can tell what acting has literally given you throughout your entire life.
Oh, it's given me enormous. You know, it's the gift that keeps on giving. It really is. That's the best thing about it. I think it's a great profession. I think it's an honorable profession. I think it's a profession that people have lots of stupid ideas about. They don't necessarily understand it. But it's also, it's a profession of generosity. It's about giving. That's what it's about. It's about giving. There's an act of giving, and it's as valuable as a church act or religious act, because it's the same thing.
That's beautiful. You've been so generous. And I'll tell you, the other nice thing about acting is 5 decades in, you never know, you might be walking through an airport and people will be saying, can you tell me to fuck off?
Oh, I get that all the time. And of course, it's the easy thing to say to people is to tell them to fuck off. Because you go, when somebody comes up and says, could you tell me to fuck off? And they're very happy. Human beings. What a, so funny.
Brian, lovely to meet you. Thanks for the time.
Take care.
Brian Cox is an actor, director, and writer. You can catch him on Succession. The latest season is out now. And his new memoir is called Putting the Rabbit in the Hat. And it's also out now.